Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by my fabulous co-host Adrienne Barker, and we are coming to you live on Chatter Social with our amazing team and live audience. Tonight we're diving into the case of a serial killer in Portland, a series of murders that has stunned the Pacific Northwest. Buckle up, because this case has everything: tragedy, controversy, and a lot of unanswered questions.
And I'm Adrienne Barker, your other host and older host. This case truly reads like a dark crime thriller. Four beautiful women mysteriously turn up dead within months of each other around Portland, sparkling fears of a serial killer. Authorities eventually link the deaths and they zero in on one suspect, Jesse Calhoun, who, in a shocking twist, has been released from prison early. Now he's charged in four murders, and investigators are looking at a possible fifth victim.
A quick note before we dive in: this episode discusses violent crimes, including murder and domestic abuse, with details that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline at 988. Adrienne and I are not law enforcement, attorneys, or forensic experts. We do our best to research every case, but remember the show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. And of course, any individuals named who haven't been convicted of a crime, including tonight's suspect, are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and don't necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
All right, tonight we aim to honor the memories of the women whose lives were lost, including Kristen Smith, Charity Perry, Bridget Webster, Joanna Speaks, and others potentially connected. We'll focus on verified facts, drawing from credible reporting, and clearly distinguish between confirmed information and the rumors or theories that have swirled around this case. We are live on Chatter Social with a live audience. This is Debate the News True Crime.
The FBI currently estimates that there are anywhere from 25 to 50 active serial killers operating in the United States right now. In this case, authorities believe they may have taken one of them off the streets. Our case timeline begins in late 2022 when 22-year-old Kristen Smith disappears from Gresham, Oregon. Her family reports her missing on December 22nd. Nearly 2 months later, on February 19th, 2023, Kristen's body is discovered in a secluded, wooded area of southeast Portland. Later court documents would allege she was killed in November of 2022, roughly 3 months before her body was found. The precise cause of death hasn't been publicly released, but it was immediately considered suspicious and treated as a homicide.
In the spring of 2023, a chilling pattern emerges as more young women turn up dead. On April 8th, 2023, the body of 32-year-old Joanna Speaks is discovered at an abandoned farm property near Ridgefield, Washington. Just across the Columbia River from Portland, the medical examiner rules Johanna's death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma to the head and neck. And investigators believe she was killed somewhere in Oregon, and her body was then moved across state lines to Washington. Just over 2 weeks later, on April 24th, the shoeless remains of 24-year-old Charity Lynn Perry, so young, are discovered in a culvert near Ainsworth State Park in the Columbia River Gorge. Charity had last been seen in early March in downtown Portland. Then, less than a week later, on April 30th, the body of 31-year-old Bridget Webster is found by a remote roadside creek in rural Polk County. And in Webster's case, authorities have not released the cause of death. And as of mid-2025, it still remains under wraps along with Perry's. The medical examiner's office did not announce a conclusion publicly, and investigators have cited the ongoing investigation as a reason for the silence.
The timing is noteworthy. Webster was killed very late in April of 2023 and found on April 30th, meaning the killer did not have a long time to cover his tracks before the body was discovered. This quick turnaround may have provided investigators with slightly fresher evidence compared to the other scenes. On May 7, 2023, yet another young woman's body is found, this time by a fisherman in a wooded area near Eagle Creek in Clackamas County. This wooded location is remote and not easily accessible without local knowledge. The remains are identified as 22-year-old Ashley Reel, who had vanished after being last seen at a fast food restaurant in Portland on March 27th. Ashley's death is also labeled suspicious, but to date, no cause of death has been revealed, and no charges have been filed in her case. However, it's notable that Ashley Reel had a prior link to Jesse Calhoun, which may be part of how detectives zeroed in on him. Investigators, now faced with several dead bodies, quietly take note of the similarities among these cases and begin exploring possible links. Each victim was found in a secluded outdoor location, from a barn in the woods to a highway culvert, a ditch off a country road, a thick forest, and a brushy field on the city's edge. In several cases, the last place the women were seen alive was in Portland's urban core, but their bodies turned up far away. This strongly indicates the killer transported the victims after killing them. The nature of the murders is characterized by a stealthy, hands-on killing style, a rapid succession of crimes in spring of 2023, and a careful effort to hide the victims' remains in remote places. These actions suggest the killer was forensically aware, attempting to destroy evidence and delay discovery.
And make the families just have to be in pain waiting to find their children. Awful. By early June of 2023, the community is on edge. Media reports highlight the 6 women found dead in the past few months, including an unidentified woman in addition to the 4 named victims and Ashley Reel. Amid growing fears of a potential serial killer, the Portland Police Bureau makes a public statement on June 4th of 2023, insisting that there is no evidence that the cases are connected. The Portland Police Bureau has no reason to believe these 6 cases are connected, the Bureau announces, urging people to avoid unfounded speculation. And of course, despite the official reassurances, multiple law enforcement agencies continue sharing information behind the scene as the investigations intensify.
A major break in the case comes just 2 days later. On June 6, 2023, law enforcement moves to apprehend 38-year-old Jesse Lee Calhoun, a local man on parole with a lengthy criminal record. When officers approach him in a park in a Portland suburb, Calhoun attempts a daring escape by leaping into the Willamette River. The attempt fails. Officers pull him from the water and place him under arrest. He's initially booked on unrelated parole violations and outstanding warrants as investigators work to gather evidence tying him to the murders. Calhoun's background immediately draws scrutiny. He has nearly 2 decades worth of prior felonies, including a 2019 conviction for assaulting an officer. Notably, he'd been released from prison in July 2021 after then Governor Kate Brown commuted his sentence by about 11 months for his help fighting wildfires.
With Calhoun in custody, authorities act quickly to ensure he remains behind bars. And on June 30th of 2023, at the request of prosecutors, Oregon Governor Tina Kotex revokes the 2021 commutation of Calhoun's sentence. And this effectively cancels his early release agreement. Woohoo! Yay, sorry, that's just me. A few days later, by July 7th, Calhoun is transferred into the state prison system to serve out the remainder of his prior sentence, all while the murder investigation is ongoing. By now, detectives, they are working full time to solidify the case against their suspect.
Mid-July 2023 brings the first public confirmation that the deaths are linked. On July 17th, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office announces that a single person of interest has been identified in the deaths of 4 women. The official press release doesn't name the individual, but it specifies the cases of Kristen Smith, Charity Perry, Bridget Webster, and Ashley Reel as being connected. Notably, Joanna Speaks is absent from that list as her case was handled in Washington. Within hours, local media breaks the story that the person of interest is Jesse Lee Calhoun. That revelation ignites public outrage and debate around Calhoun's gubernatorial commutation. For the first time, authorities openly acknowledge they suspect a single perpetrator in the string of Portland area murders. All 5 women spent time in the same general urban area, Greater Portland, in the weeks before their deaths, the same area where Calhoun was living and active after his release from prison.
Oh, the case against Calhoun progresses through the courts over the next year. In May of 2024, a grand jury indicts Jesse Calhoun on 3 counts of second-degree murder, one each for the deaths of Joanna Sparks, Charity Perry, and Bridget Webster, along with 3 counts of abuse of a corpse related to those killings. Investigators later clarified that although Joanna Sparks' body was found in Washington, they believe she was killed in Oregon, which is why her case was included in the Oregon indictment. And during the indictment announcement, prosecutors stressed that the investigations are still ongoing for the other cases, specifically the deaths of Kristen Smith and the suspicious death of Ashley Reel. Calhoun pleads not guilty to the 3 murder charges at his arraignment, and he continues to maintain his innocence as the legal process unfolds.
In the summer of 2025, the final known victim's case is finally brought into the fold. On August 5th, a Multnomah County grand jury indicts Calhoun for the murder of Kristen Smith. Kristen's remains had been the first found back in February of 2023, and now prosecutors have gathered enough evidence to charge Calhoun with her death as a 4th count. At an August 11, 2025 court appearance, Calhoun, now 40 years old, stands before a judge and formally pleads not guilty to all 4 murder charges against him. In the courtroom, Kristen's mother, Melissa Smith, and other victims' families look on, some expressing relief that after years of anguish, their daughter's cases are moving forward towards justice. Detectives and prosecutors affirm that they are still actively investigating the remaining case of Ashley Reel's death in cooperation with the Clackamas County authorities. As of now, Calhoun has not been charged in Ashley's case, but he allegedly remains a key suspect. With Calhoun in custody and waiting trial, estimated to begin in late 2026 or 2027, law enforcement and the victims' families continue to work together in pursuit of answers and justice in this disturbing case.
You know what, Joseph? Like, this is so sad because as a family member and awaiting information, awaiting answers, I just can't think of anything that could be more torturous for a family member to not even know where your child is.
Absolutely. And luckily, he has been caught, and it appears they at least believe that this is the right man, but also not just for the families, but the fear to the general public. These murders were piling up for quite a while, and law enforcement would not come out and say that they were connected. And people were freaked out because they thought there was a serial killer running around the Portland area. And now, according to these arrest reports and what's being alleged, it seems like that was the case. There was an active serial killer in Portland.
So can we go back to the commutation? I absolutely love the show called Fire Country. Anyone see Fire Country in the room? Okay, it's really good. But one of the things that they show is how they get the volunteers from the local prison and the inmates are actually trained to fight fires. So I'm like, oh, okay. So sounds like in essence that was done, but or was that the only reason that his sentence was commuted?
I'm sure that wasn't the only reason. The firefighting is cited in press reports. I could do a little more research to see if there was anything publicly disclosed as to why that decision was made. But yeah, he got almost a year off of his sentence and was released early. And that, of course, infuriated the public when this person wound up getting arrested for being an alleged serial killer. So, regardless of the reason, it looks really bad on that governor who made that decision because if this person is convicted of these crimes, it would mean that they released a dangerous criminal and didn't foresee the consequences of that. I see Mariana's hand up.
Thank you so much for hosting this case tonight. Adrienne, you posted a question why he was released, what was the reason? What I understand is that in prison, you can actually become a firefighter. So he was part of that. And believe it or not, he was having a good conduct inside the prison. So they decided to release him. But in my opinion, they failed to society to do that. they quickly made the decision to let him go earlier before he actually completed his sentence, not looking at what was he convicted for, what was he in jail for, and how releasing him could danger the community. So I think the police department or the prison system failed the community, in my opinion, by doing that.
I am glad that I am not a judge or I'm not the governor. Those kind of decisions and making them, it's got to be one of the hardest things.
It's a very hard position to be in because someone can be just acting the right way inside the prison to be released earlier, right? Like, oh, look, he is doing fantastic. He's doing everything he needs to do to be released earlier so he can continue to do his crimes.
Exactly, Mariana. And he has at least one violent felony on his record, which was assaulting a police officer. So to me, that should have been the first of many red flags. Debbie, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you because I wanted to look this up so I was sure. And so when he was granted that the clemency, he was in jail for a burglary and car theft. That's when he was given the clemency. How do you go from burglary and car theft to murder? I mean, there's just so many unknowns at this point because they're keeping everything kind of hush hush and quiet because it's still all under investigation. Since they were saying with the bodies, the conditions they were in, we may never know the exact cause of death. And was it a serial killer case or was it a case of he just was a violent person? So it'll be interesting to see as this case unfolds, the details that will come out eventually.
From what I read, I had a book all around serial killers, and some of the things I read in there, they're very precise in the middle, very detailed. They cover the trail up. Most times, these serial killers get caught is when they get a little lazy. They start to get lazy, and this is how most of them get caught.
So it took until mid 2023 for them to link the woman's deaths, finally arrest him, even though several bodies were found in quick succession. So did they move fast enough in this case, guys?
Yeah, I find that a little bit frustrating. At the same time, I know that investigations do take time. We saw this in the Idaho College murders. There was a couple month gap between when that murder happened and when they were actually able to track Brian Koberger down in Pennsylvania. And the whole time, people were up in arms saying, how come you haven't found the killer yet? But we now know that everyone was working, including the FBI, round the clock to bring the killer to justice. And that's exactly what they did. So I think sometimes investigations do take time and they don't want to alarm the public. But I don't know. People were calling serial killer for quite a while and they didn't come forward and admit that until much later. Mariana.
Yeah, I heard actually two of the mothers of the women that were killed, and they were very frustrated with the case because it took a long time to actually capture the guy and give more information to their parents. One of the mothers actually was complaining and saying some of them had mental issues and some of them were drug addicts. You know what I mean? They felt like they were not taken seriously because their kids were not quote unquote good kids.
So you're saying these girls that are very young, they were facing hardships, homelessness, or addiction that they just didn't matter.
I'm saying what heard them say. I've watched several of them saying that. And it's sad that they felt that way. They felt like the law enforcement didn't feel like they were worthy of taking this case a little more serious. And that's pretty sad, because at the end of the day, they're human beings. It doesn't matter how much money or what class they are from. Some of them were from the country, so they were not like high society kids. They were just regular people, you know.
Exactly, Mariana. And we see this in a lot of other serial killer cases where they will target women who are in vulnerable professions, sometimes in sex work, some people who have addiction issues, and their deaths tend to go underreported, and it does take law enforcement oftentimes longer to investigate and link cases.
Yeah, so I do think that they were slow in the investigation and everything, but I just wonder if it was so delayed because they wanted to make sure that they had all the evidence that they needed to make it a solid case.
So, Debbie, I hear you on that, but at the same time, I'm like, if they really wanted him to stay in prison and they wanted to make sure, they would not release him. Like, yeah, you took all this time to catch him and to make sure that he was the one, but you were so quickly to let him go. And in that, he committed another crime.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but I think that, when he was first released from prison and committed it was for the burglary and the theft that he had when he was finally charged with the murder, he hasn't been released since, and I think they actually got him on, if I read it correctly, they got him on a parole violation, and that he was released initially because his crime was only burglary and car theft, it wasn't murder.
So, how much information was released to the case?
There's not a whole lot of information that's been released. They haven't even released the cause of death for some of the victims. We do know that one of the early victims died of blunt force trauma to the head and neck, and that victim's mother was quoted in the press as saying that her daughter died a very grim, vicious type of death. So we can draw conclusions based on that, but we don't actually even know the cause of death for the majority of the victims.
Yeah, the reason why they haven't released a lot of information is because the case is still ongoing, right? It's still under investigation, so you can tell. I think eventually they will put everything on the table, but this case is still like it's like fresh, like there's so many evidence that they gotta bring to the table to finally get this guy hopefully in prison forever. So he doesn't come out again and do this, you know?
You know, I want to go back to the family members. It feels like a lot of times the victim families are constantly put through the ringer. So, police officers, I know your jobs are tough, but we need to be more empathetic. I mean, how hard is it to say, we're listening to you, we hear you, we're working on this? And even if they don't have the money to raise themselves, that the department can help to raise money.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
stumbling over it.
no, I mean, I can understand how a victim's family would obviously feel that way, and we do know that a lot of women from these underprivileged communities who are vulnerable do get targeted, and their deaths are not always investigated as quickly. But at the same time, Adrian, I'm going to say the police also have to be able to independently conduct their own investigation without other people inserting themselves into it and potentially leaking information or messing things up. Because in the death of a family member, if you don't have a prime suspect, a lot of the times the family members themselves are suspects. So I think there's a balance that you have to strike there. But I can understand why police officers keep quiet on investigations and don't always loop the family in.
Okay, that makes sense. You bring in the common sense, I bring in all the emotions. Just so awful. Let's continue the conversation. So Ashley Reel, she's interesting. Ashley Reel's death still remains uncharged. So they name Calhoun as a person of interest. Joseph, in your view, and then I want everyone else to give an answer, what hurdles might investigators be facing in proving Calhoun's involvement with Ashley Reel?
So I think that the decomposition of the bodies, which someone mentioned earlier, that's going to make it difficult because a lot of key evidence, possible DNA evidence, fingerprints, stuff like that can be washed away or degraded and not used in court to mount the case against the killer. But I actually think that in the actually real case, although no charges have been filed, I think they're going to have a very easy time linking her death to him if he was in fact the one responsible. Because Ashley Real is the only victim or potential victim that is linked to Jesse Calhoun. She actually filed a domestic violence claim about him prior to her death.
Oh. Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
So I love what you just say, Joseph. It's also interesting to me when I heard some of the reporting is that all these women may be connected to each other somehow. And that would be very interesting to know. But again, they haven't released that information. So we won't know until that happens. But it is a possibility that they are connected. Because remember, some of them were doing drugs. So it's possible that they were connected that way. And also, one of the mothers, I can't remember which one, has been investigating on her own. Did you know that? And she went to a place where the killer actually brought her daughter. And that was pretty hard to watch. The place was disgusting. And there were some of his belongings there. But that's where her daughter was. And they were and close to that location, that's where they found her.
Was that Kristen Smith?
I believe so. I believe so. Her mother has been tracing the places where all this happened, and she has literally researched the whole entire area. So she's doing some investigation of her own.
So she kind of like went to her child's last journey with this guy.
Yes. Yes.
No.
And she went to the place where he had her. Like she was there. She said that when she got to that location, a lot of his things were there. And she took pictures of all of this stuff, clothes, everything that was there, which is very clever, for her to have all that evidence.
But how did the mother find it and not the police?
Because she searched. She,
So
as I
she
told
was
you,
doing the work.
she has been investigating on her own.
I didn't read that. Joseph, did you?
I did not, but I will take Mariana's word for it. That is very interesting.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I did some research and I watched the video where she takes this guy that is also talking about this case and takes him to that location and show him everything. Mhm.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense. And there's so many of us like citizen journalisms that are out there. So amazing, man, to do that. Wow. But I agree with Joseph when he said, Mariana, I totally trust what you say. And thank you so much for adding such value every week. And Debbie, too. It's amazing, you guys. Mary Kim, incredible. I feel bad for the people living in Portland, Oregon, too. Like how horrible is it? I've been to Portland, Oregon. I'm Connecticut, so we kind of say Oregon, but I'm trying to say Oregon. Um, and I remember that they have a pretty strong homeless problem. Anyone been to Portland recently that could give us some information? No,
I
I think that's still true, Adrian. The homeless situation is really bad. It's scary.
in Portland. Hey, Pamela, by the way,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead, Joseph.
I agree with Pamela. My understanding is that they have a serious homeless population there. But I was just going to circle back to the fact that the police didn't announce that there was a serial killer and that these cases weren't linked for such a long time when the general public was very fearful of this potentially happening. How do we feel about that? The police taking such a long time to acknowledge that there was a potential serial killer and that these murders were linked together.
They've got to weigh it, right? They've got to weigh on people in panic. And all of a sudden, if you say there's a serial killer, what happens in that case? On the other hand, if you inform people, they're going to be safer. When you tell a woman, don't walk alone, walk with a buddy, be careful, don't park your car, don't park next to a white van, like all the little things. I think that's really important. So I think that I wouldn't have the answer because that kind of balancing of public safety and public panic. I don't even know what that looks like, but what's your guys' take? Debbie, what's your take?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the whole fact of the bodies and the decomposition. They didn't know that they were initially dealing with a serial killer, and by definition, with a serial killer, they kill in the same manner. So each person is murdered the same way, and they still can't establish that and aren't releasing the details to that and don't know that they will ever be able to say that because of the fact of the decomposition of the bodies. So I think that not to scare everybody, they held off on saying that they have a serial killer because in essence, they still don't even really know if he'd be considered the quote unquote serial killer because they don't know the exact methods of death.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Debbie, and that totally makes sense. With a serial killer, you have to establish an MO, and that includes the manner of how the victims were killed. And you're right, because of the decomposition, it was difficult, if not impossible, for them to determine that, at least in the beginning.
And how's he like, what you just throwing this body in your car and then going across the state to try to find like places to dump the body?
It's not
You
crazy for people who that's what they do. It's like piece of cake for them, because they used to. I think it's a thrill for them to do the whole thing. Like, I'm gonna go find a place to put it, and the whole thing is like it's like chocolate to them, probably. So for us, it's hard to believe and to think about how can someone like take the time to do that? That you actually going to kill the person, that body in your car, drive across town, and then dump it in the dirt with no remorse. When I look at this man in his eyes, there were videos of him in mouth shots, and you can look into his eyes. I like to look into people's eyes because the eyes are like, and my grandma said, the mirror of your soul. I, all I could see was pure evil and someone who has a lot of anger inside of him. So it's not difficult to think that this person is capable of doing this. That's how I feel.
Mariana would like to have you rewind and not to bring up chocolate because that's just a bad analogy for me because I absolutely love chocolate, and that won't stop me from eating it either. But I just I'm having such a hard time with these serial killers. But I am going to say one thing. I'm glad that he pleaded not guilty. I'm glad because let's get this case to trial. Let's have the victims' families look at him and let's get more information. So, Joseph, 25 to 50 serial killers out there, one almost could be in every state. I think we all have to just look around and be safe. So,
Exactly, Adrian. That was a shocking statistic that 25 to 50 estimated active serial killers in the United States right now. That is pretty scary. And that also can speak to maybe why the police didn't announce the link between the murders, why they waited so long. Because think about that. If law enforcement basically announces that there's a suspected serial killer in your area, that is going to change the way the public behaves. That could affect the economy. People might stay in, not go out as much. So I think it's tricky. It's a tricky balance when law enforcement has to weigh whether to announce these things or not.
yeah. Yeah. Do you know if he has an attorney?
Yes, so he has a public defender, and so far they really haven't mounted a defense publicly. They have made an allegation against someone who was involved in the case. They're alleging that that individual, who's a publicly elected official, used this case and their client in their campaigning and used the phrase something to the effect of took a man who murdered four women off of the street. And they're saying that because he is innocent until proven guilty, you can't prove that he actually murdered those four women, and therefore you are prejudicing a potential jury by you as a public official making a statement like that. So that's really the only defense they've mounted so far. Unclear if the judge is going to take that into account.
Okay, that's interesting.
My thought, and we saw this earlier today when we were watching, is why are they waiting till 2027 for his trial? To me, like, I don't get the point of waiting. And I know they were talking to the fact of your rights to a speedy trial. So my next concern is if he doesn't get what they deem as his speedy trial, then is that going to be another grounds for him to be released?
They also wanted to trial him with all the murders at once. And I think one lawyer was saying that the friends may as do it trial by trial for each case. So if that's the case, that's going to take a long time because they will have to go through each case instead of going at one with all the cases. Make sense?
It does. You know what scares me? Is that 2027 is around the corner. I feel like we're gonna blink, like, now we're gonna be reporting on the case of, like, literally, even though it feels like a long time, it also weirdly enough feels like a short time, especially if they have to go through everything.
Yeah, and Debbie, you are correct. His defense team is requesting a speedy trial. So that can be used strategically for or against. If a suspect feels like they don't have the evidence yet and they're still pulling it together, they can request a speedy trial to try to pressure the prosecution into jumping into court when maybe they're not fully ready. And on the flip side, we see this a lot. We saw this in Brian Koberger's case. Suspects will waive their right to a speedy trial and try to drag things out as long as possible. So that is all for tonight's deep dive into the Jesse Calhoun case. This has been a truly sobering story, one that blends a serial crime drama with very real human tragedy and even political controversy. At its heart, though, we must remember the victims: Kristen, Joanne, Charity, Bridget, and Ashley, young women who should still be alive today. Our thoughts are with their families, who spent many agonizing months not knowing what happened to their loved ones.
Thank you for joining us to debate the news true crime. We strive to bring you fact driven, thoughtful examinations of the cases that grip the headlines and our imaginations. If you found value in this discussion, please tune in next time. By the way, we are live on Chatter Social. You can download the app for free or come on in and look for Debate the News True Crime. And there you will see the people I'm going to thank right now, which includes Mariana. Thank you so much. Debbie, thank you. Mary Kim, thank you. And Pamela, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we will see you on Tuesday night, 7 p.m., live here on Chatter Social. Until then, I'm Adrienne Barker.
And I'm Joseph Lobosco. Stay curious, stay informed, and as always, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.